Welcome to the Quantum City Initiative, a show about the most important stories, ideas at the intersection of AI, cities, real estate, and the leaders shaping the future of how and where we live and work. Do you save and reinvigorate cities, or are you building new ones?
What is most critical for cities in the future with this sort of AI factory race to work?
App 28 finally is here. Welcome back to the Quantum City Show. Took a little bit of a hiatus. Well, we had a lot of action this week. Quantum City Review of Boston. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about some Q1 stats. We like to joke about how we're sort of the most viewed podcast in CRE history. And I stand by that, mostly because I don't think there are any podcasts in CRE, kidding. But listen, there's a lot happening in the world today. We're going to immediately kick things off because I know we're going to run out of time. Let's talk power, man. Let's talk power. Massive story I want to dive in on. I want to get your opinion on this. The Microsoft-Chevron deal. Tell me a little bit about why that's important. I guess not a deal that you might assume at face value. And I will say there was another deal many years ago that's massively impacting. Delta bought a refinery way back when. Now with oil prices through the roof, Delta's sitting in pole position. To me about what this means and what the Microsoft-Chevron deal is all about.
Well, the administration, if we remember, a year ago, came out firing on AI. And they had that big summit in the Middle East and everything was cranking. And then over the last year or so, there's been a ton of pushback because of strain on the grid and things like that. This Microsoft-Chevron deal is an example of what the administration then kind of pivoted on, saying you guys need to figure out how to do this without putting strain on the grid. So it's called behind the meter, right? And apparently Chevron is building a power hub with 2.5 gigawatts of gas-fired power. I think it's in like West Texas.
Yep, Texas, of course, it's in Texas. Let's be honest.
GE's getting in on the deal. So GE Vernova turbines are going to be part of this. And it's in partnership with Microsoft. Apparently, they're trying to put it in this Energy Forge One LLC, because I think, the tech companies love how their internal people don't like any sort of energy production, seemingly. But this is the only way forward in terms of, can we kind of thread the needle here on we need to advance AI. I think it's a national strategic priority for obvious reasons. And how do we do it without, the consumers kind of getting screwed? And so that's the whole behind the meter construct. These guys are making so much money. And if you can do it behind the meter, you think of the opportunity cost of falling behind on AI versus paying for the power. This is one of the models to do it for sure.
How does this play into, where my mind immediately went with this is like, we're going to all of a sudden start paying Microsoft instead of Eversource. Like, where does this play out from a Quantum City perspective? It's in West Texas. Okay. West Texas, we know, I guess, has a lot of land. We know compute is constrained, as evidenced by my usage in Claude this morning.
Yeah, I love how Claude quietly just stops running sometimes, and you have to yell at it and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" It's no, I was working on it. It's literally becoming like a human. Hey,
Yeah.
You working? Yeah, no, I was working. All right, where's the work product? Oh, hold on, give me a second. I'll get it.
But why? And again, we've talked about energy a bunch. From a Quantum City perspective, how important is the infrastructure here? Not just for AI, just for, and I guess, can we even say the world without AI? So maybe that question doesn't even make sense anymore, not just for AI, but what does this really mean? You talked about consumers. We've talked about in the past that consumers' energy bills are getting higher because Microsoft and everybody else. SoftBank is deploying a massive amount of money. Meta is deploying a massive amount of money. Alphabet raised nearly $32 billion in about 24 hours for their AI infrastructure. Are we in the beginning stages of basically updating our entire energy grid? And the catalyst was AI here?
Yeah, this is your point about quantum cities. When you think about the evolution of say, the original Mac or Dell computers and where our hardware devices are today. We got to update our hardware of cities, and obviously it's significantly more challenging because the hardware of cities is embedded in our everyday life platforms, and so that makes people feel a certain way. And in order for us to continue to be competitive and obviously have the leading economy and all these things, it's not a question of whether we need AI and we need to be the leader. We absolutely have to be.
Mhm.
The analogy here is if we're sitting here in the 1800s and you're starting to see the benefits of the industrial revolution and saying, no, we want to stay in an agrarian economy. That didn't work well for people that didn't take to all of the benefits of the industrial revolution. And as we've talked about on the show, the Luddite fallacy is real. We always think tech is going to take jobs. It changes jobs, it gets rid of some. But I think big tech also has a kind of like a brand and PR problem. They're making the same mistakes they made around social media. They just don't, I don't know if it's like a West Coast thing and they don't understand how to talk to like normal people because they're in a bubble, but they need to be far more creative on. I think there's a huge advantage for the big tech company that figures out how to bring along, local populations. And I think that's like the big challenge ahead because, your typical regional, whether it's state, county, town, city, whatever politician, is probably not the person who understands AI the best. And it's low hanging fruit to point at the boogeyman and scare, the local citizens of this thing. And I think some of it's warranted. I think there's a lot of concerns. People don't know how it's going to ultimately work and play out. But I think big tech needs to take the responsibility for explaining, and not just explaining and using marketing speak, but like how can they make this beneficial to, everybody.
Is big tech going to turn into big energy? Where does that come out? I mean, you talked about a PR problem. I mean, I don't think tech may be worse than the energy companies, depending on who you're looking at, but energy companies certainly aren't sort of the greatest in most consumers' eyes. Does big tech turn into big energy here?
I mean, I think more broadly, the question is tech becomes much more horizontal.
And do we even call it tech anymore?
Well,
Sorry.
that's a good point. Like we, I forget. I think it was the guy from Fifth Wall, Brendan, who was
Yeah.
saying he's trying to make the claim that in the next year or two, he's predicting that we'll see, a big tech company buy a commercial real estate business.
Talking his own book, but I
Yeah,
like
right. He's hoping he needs those returns. I'm not totally sure if that will be where, I guess you would call it verticalization, but I think energy, you're much closer. So the question is, at what point, tech starts to sit over or under, depending on how you want to look at it, everything, right? So this is no different than any past kind of, business cycle of, do you vertically integrate? When you think of your supply chain, energy is now one of the
Mhm.
bottlenecks, the most critical bottleneck of the supply chain. It's that and compute. So who's going to go verticalize? Like you think about the industrialists, Carnegie and Rockefeller and ultimately JP Morgan got in the game. Um, they kind of pioneered like massive scale verticalization. Sometimes you go horizontal, but I would put the probability at relatively high. I don't know if it'll be a full buyout or like
Mm.
JVs or unique partnerships, but this Microsoft dipping its toe in with Chevron, I think, is an indicator of where this stuff is going.
So we talked, and we're going to get to the next story in a bit. We talk about bubbles. Can you make that sound for me? Oh, not bad. So we talk about bubbles where, the media, the news, everybody's comparing it to sort of the dot-com bubble. We saw Allbirds famously a shoe company rebrand to an AI company overnight and see their stock jump like 500%. And the callback there was back to the dot-com bubble, companies just putting a .com at the end of their name and seeing valuation spike. However, the real counter here, and I think what you're talking about is, tech or not, this isn't the bubble. And I'm sure there's ancillaries to the smaller bubbles that are there, but this is the reinvention of the railroads. Really.
This is not a bubble. I think there's, there's going to be some bumps along the way in terms of, you just think of exactly what you're talking about in terms of the different areas of the stack: energy, compute, and then there's, ultimately demand, end user adoption, and some things in between. And it's more going to be about equilibrium and, the capital markets. But the problem with the .com, and where this is not similar, is that, there was all of this price kind of, you know, overheating prices on the stocks. And, things were trading at insane multiples of revenue when adoption wasn't there, because there weren't enough people literally on the internet to adopt to warrant kind of the multiples those companies were getting. These guys are facing a different problem, where you see it with Anthropic and Claude. Like, they're getting hammered with usage so much that they need the infrastructure to serve the demand. So that's a first class problem. And, the productivity gains and I think, efficacy of the technology is just so good. You're going to have, for example, Oracle was highlighted in the Wall Street Journal, where they don't have the cash machines of Meta or Apple or some of the Mac, whatever. I forget if it's 7 now or if it's 8, but they don't have the cash machines, and their CapEx outlays are massive, and banks have rules on how much exposure they can have from a lending perspective. So, like, Oracle's kind of getting squeezed, but it's a smart play, I think, on their part, because they need to find their future in AI. So they're going to have to navigate the capital markets. And will some people get burnt here and there? Probably. But the biggest risk is this kind of regulatory, and sentiment issue, which could suppress demand. So that's where it comes down to. I don't think it's a bubble, but very separate issue for like startups and others playing. Like, when you look at the velocity of, Anthropic's product development kind of cycle and how quickly they're coming out with new things, it forces, I think there's a ton of opportunity for startups, but you can't think, the old rule, if you were a consumer app that was, at all in entertainment or anything social, you needed to be slightly far away from Facebook because they could fast follow copy. You now need to be like 2 to 3 standard deviations out from these guys, particularly Anthropic right now, because they're building new stuff so fast.
Yeah.
It's like OpenClaw was a hit 2-3 months ago, and now Anthropic essentially has
It's their own managed agent.
Yeah.
Real quick, before we move to the experience gap in JLL's most recent report, we had a conversation with Daniel English a couple of weeks ago, and he's focused heavily on data centers, AI data centers, bringing them to more of an urban environment. So my question for you, real quick, to sort of transition into this, how does this potential deal, or the notion of power being the new land, how does it impact developers and sort of builders right now? We're going to talk about commercial real estate trends. We're going to talk about leasing trends shortly. How should developers, how should JLL, how should these folks be thinking about this power opportunity? Because it's not just building data centers. It's not just building factories, right?
Right. Well, I think there's opportunities in both power and in data centers and compute. And I think, frankly, this is where startups are going to start to look different. Everything was application layer in kind of the cloud SaaS age, because it was, if you were a big provider, you could not find a niche, because you had to kind of be broad scale such that, a large enough segment of the market could adopt your tools, right? now with mass customization of software and agents and things, app layer alone, I still think there's opportunity, but it's going to be challenging. And I think there's really interesting opportunities for developers and people where there's just more natural moats in terms of, do you know the local regulatory folks? Can you start to get what Daniel English is talking about? I think there's going to be, other models than just you see these $2 billion data center, anything in the headlines that's massive with a massive name and not a local name. Like, it's gonna it's gonna draw a lot of scrutiny. So I think the entrepreneurial age for commercial real estate is super compelling to find some new models, be far more innovative. Like, it's not a
Yeah.
very innovative industry, right?
Don't tell
So
them that.
I think there's, I'm less dangerous on the power
Mhm.
stuff, but I think there will be alternative models. There's some good opportunities for entrepreneurs there. And then on the data center, in terms of what Daniel English and some other people are talking about, distributed models, edge models, I think there's really interesting opportunity there.
Love it. Okay, let's move to commercial for a bit. Let's talk about the experience gap. We've framed this through a handful of shows. JLL just published their Q1 2026 Office Market Dynamics report. It's absolutely fantastic. You have to give them your email address to download the report, which I would recommend doing. And you can also click Don't Market to Me so you don't get their newsletters. Kidding. Love you guys. But the best thing about this report, and I'll rattle off a couple of quotes, then I'll get your response, and then we'll rattle off some more statistics. But the most interesting thing outside of all the real estate trends and pre-COVID and post-COVID statistics we'll get to in a bit, 10% of the office buildings are carrying more than 60% of the total national vacancy. Okay, before I get your response, the market is not 22% empty. The market is really not the issue. A small specific set of buildings is dragging down the entire market. 10% is eating the other 60. Back in episode 19, callback, you said, you quoted, we don't have a demand problem. We have a platform problem. Well, 90 days later, you have your receipts here, my friend. Trophy is 13% above pre-pandemic leasing. Class A, below. Class A, remember Class A was the best? This is why the Class A, B, C crap, that stuff's over with.
Yeah.
Class B and C still 40% below. Q1 saw more than 4 million square feet leased at starting rents of over $100 a foot. Highest Q1 volume JLL has ever recorded it. You've nailed it there. What's your take on this, my friend?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you giving me my flowers. I called this. It was pretty obvious. And frankly, this is kind of like, to some degree, return to office. Everybody's just got to stop talking about it like it's over. Who cares? It's a small segment of buildings that are screwed. And I mean, it sucks if obviously you're in those buildings as from an ownership perspective and frankly from a tenancy perspective. But there's no more guessing, is there opportunity? Like, it's very obvious there's opportunity. But I would expand the platform problem to kind of what you're alluding to, which is we also have a classification problem. And trophy, like, what does trophy mean? That's a subjective term. And there's
Trophies, like kids' trophies.
yeah, but there's no central governing body that, like, there's no objective criteria.
And there was none for A, B, and C either.
I know. And, somebody's where the industry likes to really dumb things down. And there's a huge difference between simplification and dumbing down. We need to stop dumbing things down. We need to simplify for sure so that people can comprehend things. But even the concept of A, B, and C doesn't make sense because, I was talking to a couple of people on the West Coast, and we saw this in kind of the SaaS boom where, the growth stage tech companies, which were essentially what the AI companies are today, which are the growth area of leasing. They didn't want to be in the fancy, shiny tower where you have the professional service people in suits and ties in the lobby. They liked the, brick and beam style look vibe, studio, whatever.
Mhm.
And I heard from somebody on the West Coast, like that's kind of coming back. Now it needs to be aesthetically brick and beam, and
Mhm.
it's still got to function like a, probably A or trophy. But we need smarter classification tailored to the actual occupancy and demand, right? Like,
Well, that and the experience. We talked about this. And again, this is talking our own book because I know you're working on something called the experience score. But let's be honest, like, why isn't there just a ranking system on the experience score? There's a massive amount of data. Now it's siloed as hell that we just need to measure. Call it 0 to 100, call it 0 to 1,000. I don't care what it is. Get rid of the fake made up brokerage trophy, class A, class B, class C. Brick and beam has a time and place. It's a fantastic asset if the experience is great there. And that's all. And by the way, different buildings have different experiences,
right.
and it depends on the tenant mix. And so just because a building doesn't have a roof deck and all, pretty glass, it could have the old brick and beam and no roof deck. That experience, by the way, could be higher, right?
Yeah. And there's just far too much, when you kind of go down like the 5 whys test of, hey, why don't you learn more about the unique tenant needs and wants, not even the tenant company, but of the, population of people in your building. And landlords are like, we can't do that. Tech can easily do that. We've been ad targeting people
Mhm.
for a very long time, and everybody's got insanely rich data profiles to personalize their experience. And frankly, this will be more beneficial because you won't just be, ultimately spied on through a consumer application, but it will inform capital projects. And then it's, you know, well, then it would cost a lot of money to change it. Yeah, but somebody's going to do it. Like a lot of prop tech has been trying to convince incumbents to change. And I think the next 5 to 10 years is a lot of prop tech people, you know, prop tech got hammered for quote unquote not understanding commercial real estate. Well, I don't think commercial real estate understands the future of commercial real estate. So I
Cool.
think you're going to see technology type folks and particularly tech forward commercial real estate people, forming just direct competitors and being like, all right, we can't wait anymore. Like this stuff is so obvious that it needs to happen. And they don't want to do it because they don't want to change. So,
Well, because they didn't have to change for so
right,
long. The lease length was longer than the whole period of most funds. Like it was
right.
just coupon printing. You've said that a million times, man. Like
Yeah, and
it was
I
the
told
best
the
business to be in.
story. I forget a couple last episode or episode before. Sam Zell, who is no longer alive, he got this in the '80s. Like he was innovative, and he was the first person to do shared executive suites, essentially conferencing and meeting rooms. And people thought he was nuts, and he was like, "I want to cater to the whole journey of my customer." Right? It's not a novel concept. It's not super hard to understand, but they conflate capital market tightness and investors being wary, and it's, well, because you haven't made the case in data that this is so obvious. There's so much margin to be had. Like demand signals are back. If the product isn't matching it, that's on the supply. Like they have to create the platform capabilities to iterate and develop the supply in a way that buyers will buy.
And buyers are buying. Let me rattle
Yeah.
off some more statistics and give you some more data here, and then I'll get your response. So net absorption, positive for 3 consecutive quarters. It's up 3.5 million square feet in Q1. Okay, great. Leasing activity plus 7.6% versus Q1 2025, up almost 4% over the past year. 25 of the 52 markets tracked by JLL are 90% plus of their pre-pandemic leasing. Tech leasing's up, finance, everybody's up. Okay, great. 4 million, like I said, square feet leased at $100 a square foot or higher is the highest that JLL has recorded. Okay, fine. The capital markets or the public markets are still down a little bit. And there's perhaps some wars going on or something like that, which we're not going to talk about, but that could be laying into that. Now let's talk about some other data statistics. What we're seeing just in HQO's data. Okay, just for the first couple of weeks in Q2 and Q4, resource bookings up 35% year over year across our portfolio. Event bookings up 50% over the past 8 weeks. Okay, service requests are more than just doubled. Okay. That's just our internal data. Now let's look at prop moto. Let's compare that to prop moto. Average peak utilization across the market, 25%. Okay. Not great. But A+ buildings, or whatever the hell they're calling now, A+, a trophy, prop moto's calling A+ trophy, 95% plus occupancy in the middle of the week. Okay. We are seeing this play out. People are buying, people are leasing, people are coming back to the office if the product is there and they're using the office.
Yeah. If the product's there and their employer is making them, which particularly with what's happening with AI, I think, again, the return to office is netting out where you're going to have a couple of days where your head's down and you don't need to be with people. And then you're going to have days where I think it's imperative from an employment perspective that you're more than, a name on Slack or whatever it is. Like, it's not, to your point, it's not a demand problem in commercial real estate. It's just Darwinism. Like, a lot of these folks are hoping that these signals mean like it's going back. It ain't going back. It's different. And you gotta evolve, and you really need to evolve quickly because, lenders are, we're seeing delinquencies. We're seeing people given even outside of commercial real estate. Like, when was the last time you saw Thoma Bravo give back a company to their lender?
To the company. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
We don't want to run that anymore. But to your point, distress is also accelerating. Okay. That's not slowing down.
No.
So people need to act fast. There was just an example of almost a 500,000 square foot building in Chicago. It traded for about 68 million a decade ago, was just sold for 4 million. So at the same time, if the product's not there, people are going to be hurting.
And that's the buying price, like people will have to buy, you'll have to sell that low. Because the amount of capital to make it, a market worthy product is just going to price people out. At this point, you just need to take the medicine.
You need to take the medicine. Now, to transition to, we're going to talk about our hometown city for a little bit here.
Oh, boy.
A couple of minutes. To transition here. Okay. Some of that data is pretty good. Okay. That means people are coming to the office midweek if the product is there. Well, our product's not currently there in our office. We've talked about that a bunch, which is
no.
Now we still do come to the office, but still walking around Boston in certain areas that were known for, the corporate lunches and Post Office Square and all that sort of stuff, it's still just kind of depressing. So the transition, although we're talking about hometown city of Boston, we've talked about this. Would love to get some local politicians, Mayor Wu, please, if you're listening. I know that
you won't talk to people in commercial real estate, apparently, so I'm not holding
on. Boston has had an innovation pedigree, my man. We started a company solely on this, 15, 16 years ago, called Boston Innovation. The 128 belt was there. Boston feels like we're in a little bit of trouble. We're maybe lacking. We're maybe not a quantum city. We, and by we, I mean Claude and a couple other models here have our scorecard for Boston. The reality is on our quantum city metrics, individual liberty, B-, economic dynamism, B-, system efficiency, C+, citizen-centric design, B+, city commute. I can attest to this one.
Worst in the country.
D+, I'd give it an F. Overall grade, like we're a C. Now, there is some good things, but I'll get your response. There's some good things happening, and I'll get your response first. Where's your take on where Boston is either succeeding or failing in the lens of being a quantum city?
Well, I mean, before anything, it's got to be, you have to have a leader that understands economic dynamism. You cannot just, we've seen mobility isn't an issue. You're seeing this in our friends down in New York, where the mayor stood outside and lambasted Ken Griffin, and Ken was like, cool, I might not build my Park Ave building that was going to create tens of thousands of jobs and a bunch of economic value. Like, these corporations are sophisticated and have optionality. And our mayor seems to be hell-bent on not particularly working with the business community, which these things tend to spiral where, a city, particularly if you care about the city like we do with Boston, if you're pushing out a lot of the economic engine, um, and that type of politician then is going to only be left with the types of people who will vote for them, then it's like a death spiral that you can't get out of, because you'll have these people who dip their toe in being like, hey, I want to help the city be more moderate, but the people who would vote for that person are gone. So it's not looking good. I don't really see where there would be a change in direction for Boss. It's a huge problem. And then I think for the tech community, we've talked about what Ryan Durkin's doing with kind of
Friend of the
the
pod.
AI initiative and pushing it forward, which is
Yeah,
great.
what's that called? The Messages AI Coalition. I want to make sure we do give him a shout out. Check him out on LinkedIn, Ryan Durkin. They do have a big event coming up. I think the
Yeah.
first 100 days of the AI Coalition. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to him. Awesome what he's doing. But I think holistically, you just look at the gap. And I think Mark Andreessen had a tweet about this where, like, the difference between West Coast and East Coast with regards to AI sophistication. I'm butchering the tweet, or X post, whatever.
Oh, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad, right?
Something about it widening. It was surprising, and it's getting even farther. The
Yeah,
widening out. Yeah, it's
yeah,
huge. I remember that one. Yeah. We'll link that in the show notes.
yeah. So not feeling good, and then you have the complete counter to it. I forget if it was the UAE. I think it might have been the UAE. We should pull this up. Um, but I believe the UAE announced that over the next several years, something like 50 to 60% of their government services will run on models that they've been training specifically
Hmm.
for serving their citizens. Like, full quantum city of how do we drive government efficiency to provide a better citizen experience with this technology. And obviously they did a great job being kind of digital first. Everything went through very unified digital surfaces, which means they probably have great data and they can train on it, their own model, and they're going to have a compounding advantage.
The advantages that we've had in the past here for Boston, I don't know if they're advantages anymore, was obviously our educational ecosystem, the Harvards, the MITs. And I just keep thinking about, for such an education and academic background, we do an incredible job, and MIT is doing some exciting things, and Kendall Square is still doing well. And the folks at MIT and some of our friends of the pod, Steve Weichel and James Scott, they do a phenomenal job writing and partnering with us about quantum city initiatives. And so Boston, the hook here is that Boston is, we're the case study writers for quantum cities, and yet we can't build it ourselves, which is a bummer.
No, there's too much of it's like different worlds between MIT and the city of Boston, which is a problem.
Now, just to call back quick before we jump to some quick hits and obviously one more bit of news, so what would it take? Can Whoop, shout out, got my Whoop on. I got a great night's sleep last night, by the way.
For you, dude.
May look that up. Can Whoop, 79% recovery. Good, not great.
What's good?
Okay, well, I'm in the green. I mean, I want to be in the 90s, dude. I want to get some good Z's, but I woke up too early, which was my issue. Can Whoop put the city of Boston on its back? Can Whoop care? And by the way, do they even care? Yeah, probably, for jobs and all that sort of stuff. They just raised a massive amount of funding. They're valued at over, what is it, 10 billion. They're certainly going to go public soon. They're doing these incredible organizations. Durkin's doing the AI Coalition. Can Whoop put the city of Boston on its back? And then, is it enough? And do we need another Whoop? And who's the next Whoop? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, you always need multiple, but I'd say the silver lining is, HubSpot did it for a while. You kind of need the shining example of people that just keep pushing. Will Ahmed, the CEO, had a great post about everybody who said no to him and how they said no to him when they announced. Just keep going. I love that. Where I think Whoop has a really good advantage when you just think of the culture of Boston. The only thing that I think could really rally all Boston people is you got to have a connection to sports, and Whoop obviously does. So they're well positioned for that, where HubSpot did a great job of putting the city on its back for a while, but it
Oh,
didn't
good
have
call.
that it factor, and Whoop does. So hopefully they can, and the data they get from what it's going to do from a health perspective for
Mm,
AI has to be a huge
gotta be.
resource and asset for them.
Love that. Okay, let's go to some quick hits. I'm going to read off a stat for you, and I'm going to get your response. Office had its strangest quarter in history. 120 million square feet of new leases signed in Q1 2026. 25% jump over Q1 2025. The highest quarterly total since mid 2018. Okay, some more good numbers. We were talking about some good numbers earlier. In the same quarter, Q1 2026, the national vacancy hit 21% per Moody's, an all-time record. Chase, how can we be hitting all-time record in vacancy and all-time record in leasing?
That's how bad we dove between 2020 and 2025. So you're bouncing off a pretty low floor, and the bounce back is not one for one. It's cool. We use it less days a week, and we're going to be more efficient with our space. So you still have to look at the delta, I think, on what's the overall economy looking like, what's the overall office employment numbers. The industry has also been tremendously lazy about utilization. They tend to look at occupancy in terms of contractual occupancy, how many square feet has a company leased. But where we need to get to is how many human beings are using what spaces, office or otherwise. How often do they use it? It's no different than app measurement. What's time per session, right? Like
Right.
how often
Utilization of the
there?
product.
What's repeat usage? Things like that.
I love that. Keeping going. SL Green just hit 100% occupancy at 1 Madison Avenue. Good for them. After Harvey AI signed a 90,000 square foot expansion. The interesting thing is here, so Harvey AI's got about 200,000 feet in the building. SL Green is projecting almost 1 million in square feet in Q1 office leasing, which will be its record in its 30-year history, 28-year history. Fantastic. There's two things that I want to ask you about. Is this propped up a little bit by AI? Because Harvey AI should jump to 200,000 feet. Can we sustain this? AI companies now account for roughly 25% of Manhattan office leases.
I think it's sustainable. I think for the next few years, AI is going to be the growth, and then everything ancillary off of it. So, we need more, not less AI companies. It's no different than cloud and SaaS in the last cycle. So, and SL Green's a perfect example of a group that has good product, right? They've got good leadership. They don't kind of rest on their laurels. Like, they're very well positioned.
And Manhattan as a whole, I think,
Wow.
is having a moment. Outside, okay. Okay, I guess you can hammer me.
Right as they're having their moment, their mayor's trying to make sure they don't have their moment. Like, why would you push Ken Griffin out of New York? That's
fair.
do.
Fair. I kind of set you up for that one. Which is fine. Last quick hit here, just talking tech for a bit. I wanted to get your take on Tim Cook stepping down as Apple's CEO. Good run? Bad run? I mean, I know we're a commercial real estate company here, or a commercial real estate podcast, but technology, that iPhone is absolutely everywhere. We talk about AI a lot. You could argue that Tim had an incredible run based on the market cap gains over the last 15 years. What's your take on him real quick?
Time for him to go. It was the right move. I think you and I talked about this. I don't think he had a good run. They'll talk about the market share gains or the enterprise value gains, but you need to do it in relativity to what their lead was when he took over and their share of market cap of their competitive set where they're underperformant. And I think the issue, and look, this is going to be similar, hopefully, to Gates to Ballmer to Satya type evolution, where the second in command or whatever follows the innovative founder, and they have a core competency in operational things. Like Balmer was an animal sales guy. Tim Cook was obviously very strong from supply chain perspective, but the engine of these businesses, particularly for Apple, it's world leading, defining, innovative products, and they've completely lost that. And now what you're seeing is a decay in quality. I don't know about you, but like the app updates, like my Mac, my phone, like it's not, they've kind of lost their North Star. Like just the text message updates to favorites and all this, the UI is terrible. It doesn't have kind of that magical user experience, which, is kind of the core to Apple. So, they also have these massive assets in terms of the world's most popular device, which gives you, the high ground from a data perspective. And Siri sucks. Like they were literally out in front on,
When's the last time I don't even use it. The only time I do it is when I like fat finger the side of my phone.
And then I'm like, how do I turn this thing off? They screwed that up. They haven't had any hardware innovation. They whiffed on cars and even buying Tesla and things like that, which they're not typically an M&A shop. But this guy apparently is a hardware savant. So hopefully he's got the innovation gene and can come up with some novel things to get Apple back out in front.
Love that. Okay, before we get to one more bit of news, I wanted to go back. I had written a note, but I forgot to mention it. So, Mayor Wu would love to have you on to talk about it. However, I will say, and I don't know Mayor Wu, and I don't know if you do either, but you are tight with Governor Healy. Are you not?
Yeah.
Did you not share a moment in Santa Clara?
Yeah.
So maybe you could send her a note and we could get her on.
Yeah, she would probably be more open to it. And we were hanging at the airport, and she was. I gotta say, like we were talking about the Pats in the Super Bowl, and now on reflection, when she was saying she was worried about the flank, she was right. Drake,
which we kind of chuckled, and
Drake got crushed. Will Campbell was basically an open door over there, but
so I got
real football savant.
Love it. All right, we're coming up on an hour, 50 minutes or so. A couple more bits of news here. First bit of news. So we joked about our numbers. Here's a Q1 report of some of the numbers that we have here. Almost 40,000 YouTube views.
Hey, wow.
That's cool. 12 countries on Apple. Not bad. LinkedIn comments are up 300%, 1 to 3. Kidding. Second bit of news. What's going on with your hair? So I went high and tight. Yep. Because it's getting warmer and you're growing out the lettuce?
Zig went out, others zag. The honest answer is, with all the snow and then being in Florida and then busyness on other stuff, I've missed 2 haircuts. I've decided, as you know, I'm doing a bunch of kind of AI work, and everything, all roads lead back to the Patriots. I'm going to Edelman this thing, and I'm not going to cut my hair until, we're live and transition to some of our new AI stuff. So I don't enjoy, the reason I always have short hair is I don't have to do anything, and I optimize for, doing less stuff. So this is good motivation for me. Can't cut it till we make everything kind of real and out in the wild from an AI product perspective.
You do have a decent coif going on.
Been working on it
right now, which is fantastic. So the last bit of news, and I'm going to send you something real quick to your phone so you can look at it, because we're going to put it up in the videos. Last bit of news here. I want you to check out the video. So I've talked about my fantasy football league, how it's mostly commercial real estate folks. We have Patrick Mulvihill from Boston Properties. We got Derek Lissi from Cressa, Greg Shipers from CBRE. We got Sean Hawthorne from Foxfield, a handful of folks. So the big thing with that is the first 2 places get to pick where we do our Babson golf tournament. So we recently just went to Streamsong. I was a captain, obviously. So there's a callback to one of the earlier shows where one of the guys was talking trash on me. But the last bit of news here, I just sent you a video. That's Derek Lissi, who, by the way, is doing phenomenal at Cressa right now. He just signed a massive deal with Brunt and a handful of others. on the water's edge, hitting a golf ball right next to about a 12-foot gator.
He's a braver man than I. Good for him. How's the shot though?
It was actually fantastic. And he won. He was on the other team and he won our match on 18 with an eagle against Pat Mulvihill from Boston Properties. So it was just a terrible ending for me and Pat, who were on the same team. But for Derek and the Cressa crew, what a way to end the weekend, our commercial real estate Babson weekend with an eagle on 18. What a guy.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Someone who sucks at golf, that makes me very envious.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I played absolutely horrible. Lost a ton of golf balls. Didn't contribute a bit. Had a great time. Didn't contribute. Okay, hey, listen, man, we are so back right now. Episode 28, feel great. A little rusty, not gonna lie. I skipped some things. I kind of forgot how to read the show notes a little bit. Jumbled some things around, but hey, we're working on it. What a show. Anything you want to end on, my friend?
No, it's finally getting nice out here, so we'll have to get out and play a terrible round of golf.
Love that. All right, we got some more guests coming up soon. They are confirmed on the calendar. Always have fun with that. Smash the subscribe button below. That's what I hear all the time when my kids are watching YouTube. I don't know if we have that, but smash it and continue to give us some feedback, folks. Thanks for coming out.